Why should you care about the Russia-Ukraine conflict? What does it have to do with your daily life, your job, or your investments? Buckle up, because today we're diving into the battlefront of economies, the impact of the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine on the world economy. Geopolitical tensions, military maneuvers, and economic chess moves, all unfolding in real time. The Russia-Ukraine war isn't just a distant headline, it's a seismic event that echoes across continents. The ongoing conflict. The Russia-Ukraine conflict didn't emerge overnight, it has deep historical roots. Origins. The tensions between Russia and Ukraine trace back centuries, but the recent conflict escalated significantly in 2014. Annexation of Crimea. In early 2014, Russia annexed Crimea, a region previously part of Ukraine. This move sparked international outrage and led to economic sanctions against Russia. Eastern Ukraine conflict. Simultaneously, armed conflict erupted in eastern Ukraine, primarily in Donetsk and Luhansk regions. Pro-Russian separatists clashed with Ukrainian forces, resulting in casualties and displacement. Direct impact on Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine, a struggling economy. Economic downturn. The ongoing conflict has dealt a heavy blow to Ukraine's economy. Key sectors such as manufacturing, agriculture, and tourism have been hit hard due to instability and disruptions. The economy contracted by almost 30% in 2022. Inflation. The instability caused by the conflict has sparked inflation. The inflation rate was 17.7% in 2023, causing a surge in the prices of essential goods, which has significantly affected the average Ukrainian. Trade interruptions. Trade routes have been compromised, impacting both exports and imports. The situation is further complicated by Ukraine's dependence on Russian gas and energy supplies. Critical export routes via Ukraine's Black Sea ports in Mariupol and Odessa have been cut off. Russia, balancing act. Sanctions and isolation. Russia has been subjected to international sanctions that have primarily targeted its financial institutions, energy sector, and key individuals. These sanctions have led to Russia's isolation from global markets, posing significant challenges. The country's GDP was measured at $1.78 trillion in 2021. Energy dependency. Russia's economy is heavily reliant on oil and gas exports. The ongoing conflict has far-reaching implications for energy prices and supply dynamics. The oil and gas sector accounted for roughly 34% of Russia's federal budget revenues and up to 54% of its exports in 2021. Investment climate. The conflict situation has discouraged foreign investment, which could potentially impact Russia's long-term growth prospects. The country's public debt equals 17% of GDP. Global supply shocks. Commodity markets in turmoil. Oil and gas. Russia and Ukraine, both significant contributors to the energy markets, have a substantial influence on global prices. Any disruption in their oil and gas supplies can lead to considerable price fluctuations. Metals. Ukraine, a major exporter of metals like iron and steel, plays a vital role in the global supply chain. The ongoing conflict has the potential to disrupt production and supply chains, causing a ripple effect on the global economy. In 2020, the world's output shrank by 4.3%, over 3 times more than during the global financial crisis of 2009. Wheat and corn, Ukraine's fertile lands significantly contribute to the global grain markets. Any conflict-related disruptions can have far-reaching implications on global food security. As of now, globally, 733 million people still have no access to electricity, and the number of people lacking clean cooking facilities rose during the pandemic. Price surge worldwide. Consumer impact. The decrease in supplies has led to an increase in prices for everyday items. From fuel to food, consumers worldwide are experiencing the impact. More than 2/3 of people globally are feeling the financial strain, according to recent research. Supply chain disruptions. Manufacturers are dealing with shortages, which are affecting production schedules and delivery timelines. The price of many everyday consumer goods jumped during the pandemic. It's led to shortages of materials such as plastic, concrete, and steel, driving up prices. Investor uncertainty. The prevailing uncertainty is driving investors towards safe haven assets, causing fluctuations in stock markets and currency exchange rates. The nation with the greatest number of people worried about rising inflation was Argentina, where the official annual inflation rate hit 52.5% in October 2021. Effects on other regions. Europe, Asia, and Africa. European energy security. Europe's heavy reliance on Russian gas pipelines has been challenged due to the conflict. This situation has led to a sharp increase in energy prices and significant volatility in energy markets. The war in Ukraine has generated fears of disruptions to energy supplies and increasingly strict sanctions on the Russian energy sector. Asian markets, Asian economies, which are intricately linked to global trade, are feeling the economic strain triggered by the war. The rise of commodity prices, especially oil, nickel, wheat, and corn, is the direct impact of the Russia-Ukraine war on major Southeast Asian economies. This trend is more concerning for Singapore, Vietnam, and Thailand, who are net importers of these commodities from the conflict-ridden region. African vulnerability. Lower-income populations in Africa face rising food and fuel prices, exacerbating existing challenges. In 2020, 15 African countries imported over 50% of their wheat products from the Russian Federation or Ukraine. 6 of these countries, Eritrea, Egypt, Benin, Sudan, Djibouti, and Tanzania, imported over 70% of their wheat from the region. The Russia-Ukraine war isn't just a regional conflict, it's a complex economic puzzle with far-reaching consequences. Keep in mind that every missile fired has economic repercussions. Policy trade-offs and risks. Economic risks amplified. Currency volatility. The ongoing conflict has introduced a heightened sense of uncertainty, leading to fluctuations in currency values. This volatility has affected many currencies hard. For instance, the Deutsche Bank Currency Volatility Index climbed towards 10% on Tuesday morning in Europe, its highest level since April 2020, in the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic. Investors and businesses are grappling with these exchange rate risks. Interest rate dilemma. Central banks are facing a complex balancing act. To combat rising inflation, they may need to raise interest rates, which could potentially stifle economic growth. On the other hand, keeping rates low could risk overheating the economy. For example, the U.S. Federal Reserve targets an average inflation rate of 2% over time by setting a range of its benchmark federal funds rate, the interbank rate on overnight deposits. Managing inflation, growth, and stability. Inflation management. Policymakers are faced with the challenge of managing the impact of war-related disruptions on prices. Aggressive rate hikes could potentially dampen economic recovery. For instance, inflation spikes higher during war and economic conflict. Today, with inflation at a 40-year high and a policy rate pinned to the zero boundary, policymakers face significant constraints as they try to find ways to mitigate rising costs. Growth versus stability. The task of stimulating growth through fiscal measures, such as infrastructure spending and tax cuts, may conflict with the goal of maintaining financial stability. Enhancing the stability and inclusiveness of political institutions is important to help build trust, mitigate the economic costs of conflict, and support lasting peace. Indirect effects on advanced economies. Supply chain vulnerability. Advanced economies are heavily dependent on complex global supply chains. Disruptions in Ukraine and Russia have far-reaching effects across various industries, including automobiles, electronics, pharmaceuticals, and more. For instance, the conflict in Ukraine has led to a 13% decline in pork availability in southern Europe due to a shock to Ukrainian corn production. The global supply chain continues to be disrupted by the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Financial contagion. The interconnected nature of financial markets implies that shocks in one region can spill over to others. A banking crisis in Russia could potentially have global repercussions. For example, the tensions over Ukraine that had been bubbling up for months are responsible for a little over half of the 9% drop in the S&P 500 benchmark index of U.S. stocks so far this year. Long-term consequences, scars on the global economy, investment climate. The conflict has a lasting impact on investor confidence. Long-term capital flows may shift away from the region, exacerbating economic distress. For instance, last year, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the resulting energy crisis in Europe, turmoil in the global economy, and a slowdown in markets all generated concern that a 3-year period of growth in climate technology investment was ending. However, climate-related private market investment far outpaced the broader market in 2022 as measured by deal activity, the amount of capital deployed, and capital flows into dedicated funds. Human capital, the phenomenon of brain drain, where skilled professionals leave conflict zones, hinders economic development. After the guns fall silent, conflict leaves a legacy of damaged human capital that will lower productivity, weaken growth, and slow poverty reduction far into the future. For example, the report reveals that conflict and fragility can have substantial negative impacts that extend across decades and even generations. Such consequences extend the armed conflict impact on an affected region far beyond the conflict time period, creating serious downstream outcomes and social costs that are detrimental to economic development. Energy security concerns. Pipeline politics. Europe's dependence on Russian gas pipelines reveals its vulnerabilities. For instance, the EU gets roughly 40% of its gas from Russia. This dependence costs around $118 million a day. However, after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine 2 years ago, the European Union radically slashed its reliance on Russian gas. Russia now supplies 12% of the EU's gas imports. Diversification of energy sources becomes critical in this context. Renewed supply disruptions. Geopolitical tensions could lead to renewed supply disruptions, affecting energy prices and stability. For example, the past year experienced a major uptick in geopolitical disruptions impacting the energy system. Global supply chains are facing the worst shortages in 50 years due to the pandemic and the war in Ukraine. The disruptions could knock 4% to 5% off industrial production in the next year or two. As we navigate this economic minefield, remember that policymakers face intricate choices. The Russia-Ukraine war isn't just about borders, it's about livelihoods, stability, and the delicate dance of global finance. Conclusion. As we conclude our analysis of the Russia-Ukraine conflict's impact on the global economy, let's summarize the key points. Complexity unleashed. This isn't merely a territorial dispute, it's a multifaceted struggle that reverberates across currencies, trade routes, and stability worldwide. Supply chain tremors. From oil rigs to wheat fields, disruptions resonate across continents. Brace for supply shocks and price fluctuations. Policy tightrope. Policymakers face tough choices, balancing inflation, growth, and stability. Their decisions ripple far beyond their own borders. Long-term scars. The war leaves lasting imprints on investor confidence, human capital, and energy security. Stay alert, stay informed. Every global event is a domino in the economic rally. Keep your economic goggles on and stay updated. If you found this journey enlightening, hit that subscribe button to join us on future economic adventures. Enjoyed the ride? Like this video and share it with your fellow economic enthusiasts. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below. Until next time, fellow economists, keep exploring.